So up next, we have a presentation from Condor Energy with the ticker code CND. The company is currently focused on progressing its offshore assets in Peru with over 20 prospects and leads that the company is continuing to mature. I will now hand you over to advisor to Condor, Alan Stein, to tell you more.
Excellent. Look, thank you very much. Apologies for I've got a very poor network connection here. So we're going to go to Peru, right? And I'm going to talk to you about the Tumbes Basin and a really exciting opportunity that Condor has found itself in. So let's just go forward 2 slides. We'll skip through the corporate disclaimer, which I know everyone does, and we'll get ourselves to the first slide of the presentation. And the first thing, while that slide is changing, I guess the first point I'd like to make is that in Australia, we might not have heard very much about these basins in Peru, but they are very prolific. And I mean, the area that we're looking at has already produced over 1.5 billion barrels. So here we have a series of basins that we know are prolific, and Condor has been able to sign a technical evaluation agreement over almost 5,000 square kilometers of area in the Tumbes Basin, right up in the north of Peru. And one of the fascinating things about this basin is that there are oil and gas discoveries all around it. And we have a lot of 3D seismic data in our basin, which is an essential prerequisite for offshore exploration. And yet, only one exploration well has been drilled using this 3D seismic data. So here you have what is for a geologist an intriguing possibility. You have a proven basin with a proven petroleum system. You know that the plumbing works. We've got almost 3,000 or over 3,800 square kilometers of 3D seismic data, which, if we went to acquire that today, would cost us considerably north of $50 million. But only one well has been drilled with the benefit of that 3D seismic data. Let's go on a slide, if we could. So there's a little bit of the corporate background there, and I'm just going to leave that one for you to read. Company is perfectly adequately funded for what it's doing, and if we go on to the next slide, we'll start to talk about what we're doing. Next slide is going to show you, there's a map of the basin. You can see oil and gas fields all round about us here, and we've got a number of features already identified in our area. And the technical evaluation agreement gives us a study period of 2 years, which we are halfway through. And at the end of that 2 years, we have the exclusive right to convert this technical evaluation area into a conventional exploration contract, and then we can go off and drill our wells. So it's kind of nice. We got a 2-year period to put together prospect and lead portfolio. That work is going really well indeed, and I'm going to show you some of that and talk you through the timeline of where we're going with this fantastic project. So let's go on to the next slide. Now, it's actually not just us that think this is a really exciting place to explore. A few months ago, after we had made our entry, Total popped up in our neighborhood, taking all the acreage around us, if you like, right up to the Ecuador border. And they also have signed technical evaluation agreements. So it was nice to see a little bit of vindication of that judgment that took us into the Tumbes Basin in the first place. And in fact, if we went off to the south of this map, you'd see down there is Occidental, who are in the process or have acquired quite a large 3D seismic survey, and we think they are going to go ahead with a multi-well campaign. So I think we're in a good address, and it's certainly attracting quite a bit of attention from other companies, and we've signed a number of confidentiality agreements with third parties so that we can have discussions about forming partnerships with some large operating companies. Let's go on to the next slide. So a little bit about the data. I've mentioned that we have this 3D seismic data, and it's made up of different surveys acquired over the years. And what we've done is in order to improve that data, because the processing of seismic data has benefited hugely from the development of computing power and new algorithms. And so we can do a lot more with seismic data today than we could when it was first acquired. So we've picked 3 areas that are of particular interest to us. And we've reprocessed that data, and we've gone right back to the start, and we've redone the whole thing using new algorithms. In fact, some of them are proprietary algorithms. And that data has just been delivered, and we're starting to work it up. So we have 3 areas. We have a prospect called Bonito, a prospect called Rhea, and then we have Piedra Redonda. And actually, what I should mention, of course, is that Piedra Redonda is not a prospect. That is a sort of proven discovery. It's got a couple of wells in it, long-term test, and it has a contingent resource of just over 400 BCF of gas and a prospective resource of actually north of 2 TCF, sitting there right close to the coast. It's in shallow water and quite easy to develop that. So that's something that we're looking at, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. So we have this, as I said, this extraordinary opportunity with all this wonderful data, and find ourselves in this fascinating basin with a proven petroleum system, and it's effectively undrilled, certainly undrilled using modern data. And in fact, if we're going to have a look at the only well that was drilled. In fact, we'll go on to the next slide. And we're going to show you a little bit about what the basin looks like. So listen, a quick primer on the petroleum geology, the plumbing system of how this basin works. You can see 3 maps, increasing depth on one side of that screen. That's the regional mapping that we did with the seismic data. You can see beautifully faulted basin, lots and lots of nice structures in there. And on that stratigraphic chart, without going down the rabbit hole of the geology there, the primary reservoir in this basin is the Zaritas, Lower Miocene Zaritas Formation, nice sequence of sands and shales, and we've begun to work out where those sands are coming into the basin and where the sweet spots are in those wells. Underlaying the Zaritas is the Heath Formation, which is the oil source rock, and in fact, down beneath that again, you go into the Oligocene and the Eocene, the Mancora. And older, and that's the gas source rock. So we got an oil source rock and we got a gas source rock, and that's kind of all we have to remember as we go through the presentation. So we're looking for Zaritas reservoirs sitting on top of mature Heath Formation oil source rocks, and then deeper down we've got the Mancora. So let's go on to the next slide, and we're going to look at a little bit of the seismic data. Now, in the top slide, you can see if we go from the right to the left, you can see some of the existing discoveries. You got Albacora, Corvina, and there's that Piedra Redonda that we talked about sitting on that high. And if we keep going across to the left, you'll see one of the prospects, nice faulted anticline. And the color scheme there, the light yellow is the Zaritas, so that's our target reservoir. The darker green is the Heath Formation, almost completely shale section with some very nice oil-prone source rocks. And then beneath that in red is the Mancora, where we have those gas source rocks. And in the section below, section BB, now you can see two of the reprocessing areas that we talked about, the Bonito prospect, nice faulted high, and Rhea, another big faulted high. We'll look at those in a slightly more detail, but in the middle there, you can see Marina 1X. Now, that is the only well drilled in the basin on modern seismic data, but it did not penetrate the Zaritas. They tried something different, and when you're exploring a new basin, you do have to try different things. And they drilled into the section that lies above the Zaritas called the Tumbas, and they did not find really very much in the way of good reservoir, and that well was not successful. So we were able to learn from that, even though it was only the one well, we're able to learn from it. And we are targeting the far more conventional target in the Zaritas, where we're a lot more confident of finding sand, and it's a lot closer to the source rock. Let's go on to the next slide. Sort of brings some of this together into a little sort of play cartoon sketch. Because what you can see there, the green dashed line is the top of the oil window, and the red dashed line, top of the gas window. And what you can see is that green Heath Formation source rock sitting in the oil window, which is great. And the oil can be expelled and migrates up out of the heath. It can go up those faults and go up into those structures. And then underneath that, in red, is that Mancora Formation, and that's the gas. And you can see that gas coming up into that structure where Piedra Redonda, 2 wells into the structure. And so that is something that we're going to look at for development, and I will show you a slide on that as we go through. So it seems that all the elements of the petroleum system are coming together very well, and we have an opportunity to explore this basin for the first time using 3D seismic data. Let's go on to the next slide. We're going to look at one of the prospects. First, here's Bonito, the one in the south. Lovely, big, faulted anticline, if you like. I mean, I don't want to get too sort of carried away into the technical detail. But it's a very big structure, and it's sitting right above mature source rock. It's covering an area of about 76 kilometers. The map that we're looking at is a map on an unconformity surface at the top of the Zaritas, and we can see several layers within the Zaritas that have the characteristics of a reservoir. So it's not just one layer, there will be several target layers. And with a prospect covering an area of 70 odd square kilometers, you're looking at something that's in the hundreds of millions of barrels potential here. We will be releasing the numbers. I mentioned that we've done this is the old data. We've reprocessed it. It is being evaluated right now. Once it is evaluated, we will determine the resource potential of this, and we will have that audited by a third-party reserve auditor, and we will release those numbers to the market. But certainly you can see something of this size, 70 odd square kilometers with multiple layers. We know it's going to be substantial. Let's go on and look at the next one, which is Rhea. Now, Rhea is a fascinating one. I mean, I must admit, being a nerdy geologist, it is probably one of my favorites. There's a structural closure here, but it's very small. It's only about 4 square kilometers. But what we know is that what lies above the Zaritas, above an unconformity, is a nice thick shale package. That's the regional seal. So if you look at that top seismic section, and again, I don't want to dig down into the burrow too deep, but there's a pink layer that's labeled the Zaritas unconformity. Everything above that is sealed. And so that yellow, the blue, and the sort of orangey brown layers come up to that unconformity where they are sealed by that shale. So it's a structural stratigraphic trap. Now, when we look at the area of those reservoirs, the structural closure might only be 4 square kilometers, but those are in the 40 to 50 square kilometer range and with multiple layers. And again, it sits above that heath formation source rock where it is mature with wonderful migration pathways up into the structure. And one of the things that we were worried about here is that there's a well next to our prospect called Barracuda. Now, that was a discovery well, it's sub-commercial, but one of the things that we were worried about is that the Zeritis reservoir was not very well developed. Now, one of the great things that we can do with seismic today, rather than when this was acquired, a thing called quantitative interpretation. And I've mentioned that it's one of the bullet points in the text there towards the bottom. We were able to use a seismic inversion technique on this data, quantitative interpretation, to actually demonstrate why there are good reservoirs in the Rhea prospect that is quite different to what was in Barracuda. So it's really reducing the risk on this prospect. And I've left a reference in there to the press release from a few weeks ago where we described that methodology that we've used, and we're using similar methodology over the whole data set. Just like Bonito, the reprocessed data over Rhea has been delivered, it's being interpreted, and so there will be resource numbers, independently audited resource numbers coming out of that. Let's keep going on to the next slide, and I'm just going to touch briefly on this Piedra Redonda gas discovery. So this is like the freebie that comes with the deal. We went into this basin looking at oil exploration, and most of the folks that we're talking to are very much focused on the oil potential of those big structures that we looked at. But here we are, sitting right next to the coast. We have a discovery. So this is like the free steak knives that come with the deal. We've got independently audited numbers telling us that our contingent resource here is just over 400 BCF of gas. We've looked at the reservoir data, and we've looked at the commercial data where the previous operators have looked at turning this into a gas-to-wire project. And the power situation onshore in Peru is extremely attractive. There is very strong demand for power. So we think we have a little separate side project. Well, not so little, actually. We have a separate project here, and which we can divide apart from the oil exploration. So we're just about to kick off a feasibility study. Sort of, we've got some folks in Peru who are going to help us with all the commercial side of the IPP and the power market. And we think this, notwithstanding anything else in the project, this is going to give us something really interesting. It's very close to shore. It's very shallow water. Very, very simple project to plug this gas into a gas turbine. And power prices in Peru are very attractive. So this is a nice bonus to have. And again, we've got reprocessed data from this just being delivered. And we have a suspicion that we're going to find quite a lot of upside to this Piedra Redonda discovery. So let's wrap it up, I think, with the last slide, which is just a little bit of a summary, and it has a timeline of kind of what we're trying to achieve. So it's an incredibly simple business plan. We have a fascinating basin that's effectively undrilled with large amount of 3D seismic. We get the benefit of that, saves us at the very least $50 million to reacquire that seismic data. We're building a prospect and lead portfolio where we've got the benefit of having access to technology that really no one's had in this basin before. And we will start in fact, we have started the process of looking to partner with some bigger operating companies before we convert this project into a regular exploration license, with the objective of going on and drilling some wells to test these exciting oil projects. And as I mentioned already, as a sort of a sideline to that, we will be looking at the gas to power project coming off the Piedra Redonda gas field. The strategy down below, well, news flow really, milestones were a year into the project. Progress has been fantastic. All the regional mapping is done. The reprocessing is done. We're now working on those reprocessed data sets. We're also looking at prospects that lie outside the reprocessing areas. I mean, we've got an embarrassment of riches in terms of prospects. We've got to pick the top ones to go into our portfolio. So you're going to see some resource estimates coming out. You're going to see some news flow about how we build the JVs to take this project forward. And then we're going to convert them into regular exploration licenses and get to the bit that everyone is really focused on, which is drilling some of these tremendously exciting prospects offshore Peru. Now, I think that is the end of my presentation. There was one little pretty slide to finish it off. There you go. We're done. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the great presentation. We're running slightly out of time, but there is one question I did want to ask you. So following the completion of the reprocessing of 3D data today, what are the key next steps that investors should be looking forward to continue to unlock value in the basin?
Key next steps after the repro are the resource estimates, because we're mapping the prospects and we're looking at how the reservoirs are distributed. So we will come up with numbers. How big are these prospects? What do we see as the risks? And that we want those audited by an independent third party. Those numbers are going to be key.
Wonderful. Well, thank you again for joining us today, and we look forward to future updates.
Thank you very much, Jane.